Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Bookish Talk, the show that encourages and enlightens bookish reading and empowers aspiring authors to write and publish their fiction and nonfiction story. I'm Tim Kellis, and I'm so excited today to be co-hosting this show with my friend and the author of 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes, Devin Galladay. How is your new book progressing?
It is progressing now, deep into the third revision, Tim, and it's coming together. So now I'm getting into the book proposal material and ready to get to the next step. It's good to see you this morning.
I'll tell you, I'm jealous as heck. I've just written really the one book, and that process is just—it's so mind-blowing to take something from up here and put it down on words. I'm envious as heck. But so our guest today, Devin, is Sylvia Worsham. She is the author of Journey to Me. Trust the Wisdom of Change. This is an awesome subject. I love this. She's an empowerment coach who specializes in leadership. Prior to her becoming an empowerment coach and speaker, she was a multiple award-winning hospital sales rep for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. Oh my gosh, that's a high-level job. Sylvia hosts masterminds on leadership and personal growth for individuals and organizations on creating compelling visions, purpose, and identity to get her out of their way and thrive while still maintaining balance and joy in their lives. How cool is that? Devin, greatest part about getting this show kicked off. Please tell us today about today's virtual library.
Tim, thanks for the introduction. Yes, we are having a new virtual background. This one is the Library of Birmingham, which is a public library in Birmingham, England. It is situated on the west side of the city center at the Centenary Square, besides the Birmingham Rep and Baskerville House. You know, Baskerville is one of those words that we just don't use in English, but in England, it sure is a thing. Upon opening September 3rd, 2013, it replaced Birmingham's Central Library. The Specialist Shakespeare Memorial Room was designed in 1882 by John Henry Chamberlain for the first Central Library. When the old building was demolished in 1974, Chamberlain's room was dismantled and later retrofitted into the new concrete shell of the new library complex. When the Library of Birmingham was built, it was again moved to the top floor. It houses Britain's most important Shakespeare collection and one of the two most important Shakespeare collections in the entire world. The other being held in the Folger Shakespeare Library. The collection contains 43,000 books, including rare items such as copy of the first folio from 1623, copies of the 4 earliest folio editions, over 70 editions of separate plays printed before 1709, including 3 Pavier quartos published in 1619. But falsely dated. Very clever. There are significant collections from the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, a near complete collection of collected works, significant numbers of adaptations and anthologies, and individual editions. Also displayed in the library are 2 large code stone medallions made in the 1770s and removed from the front of the city's Royal Theatre when it was demolished in 1956. These depict David Garrick and William Shakespeare. Tim?
Wow. I'll tell you what, I could literally live in a library, man. There's no greater feeling than being around all those books and all that history and stuff. Thank you very much, Devin. Last week, you shared with us an enlightening story of the Freedom Library created by the MacArthur Fellow, poet and lawyer Reginald Dwight Betts. I did my research on the founder of Freedom Reads. Reginald Dwayne Betts is the founder of Freedom Reads, a first of its kind organization working to radically transform access to literature in prison. How cool is that? In October 2018, the New York Times Magazine published Reginald Dwayne Bett's long essay, Getting Out. Several months later, the piece was awarded a National Magazine Award. The publication was another example of Bett's entering into a new genre and bringing the same depth and richness of self-reflection and exploration of the central problem of this generation: incarceration and its effects on families and communities. Reginald Dwayne Betts transformed himself from a 16-year-old kid sentenced to 9 years in prison to a critically acclaimed writer and graduate of the Yale Law School. He has written 3 acclaimed collections of poetry, the recently published Felon, Bastards of the Reagan Era, and Shahid reads his own poem. Can you share some of more insight on these freedom libraries?
I can, Tim. In 2020, Freedom Reads, originally named the Million Book Project, supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, started. The group's aim was to put books in 1,000 prisons, one freedom library at a time. Reginald Betts of Freedom Reads states the first libraries have been installed in prisons in both Massachusetts and Louisiana. The libraries were designed with purpose and to address the challenges of current prison libraries that sometimes can offer very limited time to explore and find books because of the 9-to-5 schedule most people in prison work. Through conversations with corrections leaders, the library was designed to be no more than 44 inches tall, so as to not obstruct the lines of sight in housing units. And the multiple module units can be adapted to suit the space available in prison. The curved design allows for flexibility to fit different spaces, such as prison cells converted into libraries. The accessibility of the library when it's open has two-sided bookshelves, meaning to be both inviting and communal. Betts said, making it possible for multiple people to browse together. Additional reading benches were also designed for the library that can be used to the added space. Each shelf has a horizontal divider in the middle to keep the books from falling on each other. Its careful architecture was one of the most important elements, said Betts, who knows what the inside of prison walls are like and what makes books so important. Tim, do you have any thoughts on this story, which is really kind of amazing?
Oh my! Listen. It's, in my opinion, it's such a we don't spend enough time. People go to prison and it's like, that's it. They're in there. They did bad in this. I'm a forgiveness kind of guy, and what we can do, to help them recover. People make mistakes. It happens all the time in life, and this is awesome. Education for people that are incarcerated. That's got to be an amazing thing to be able to do. I just couldn't imagine. You lose life when you're back there. But yeah, it's amazing. That's such a great read. I'm glad we were able to share that. But last week in our Ask Devin segment, you answered the question on the next step after the first book draft, which is revision. Beta readers, developmental edit, and proofreading. One point you emphasize to inspiring authors is to get some distance after writing the first draft, maybe a week or two, so we can get what we have done. Boy, taking that break is important in the writing process, isn't it? You mentioned you worked on scenes that you thought were 9 pages long and filled with brilliance. When you went back to the scene, you realized that the best thoughts never made it to the page. We recommend watching episode 12 on the demand at e360tv.com to reflect on your first and final book draft. Devin, my next question though, what is the purpose of a synopsis letter? And what are some fundamental steps to writing one? Great question.
So the synopsis is a short overview of your novel. Think of it as an extension of your outline, which we've discussed on a couple different episodes here. It's written in prose, not in bullet points, so someone else gets to read it and get the gist of your story. The idea here is to be really concise and really specific. It goes alongside the opening of your novel, maybe the first 10 or 20 pages, depending on the submission guidelines of any agent. Um, and it'll also go along with the pitch letter that you might be including with your pitch package or your proposal. And it lays out the complete narrative arc of your plot, which is really important stuff. You want somebody to get excited, particularly an agent who theoretically has to go out and sell your book. So, FYI, this is not the same thing as a blurb, which is kind of more of a teaser of your book as either something that you or perhaps a previous reader has written, something that may be very short, exciting, and really hits home to the point of your book or why somebody else would want to read it. Some agents will read the synopsis all the way through before even looking at writing samples. Others will read all of the material you've sent and then look at the synopsis to read where it's headed. There are agents who don't give it so much as a cursory glance. I'll talk more about this particular component of your writing and whether or not you're going to need one, because we can discuss that. That's the joy of the show. We get to talk about things. So after this break, we will continue with our conversation.
Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm a senior editor here at HarperCollins, and I'd like to give you my top tips for writing a synopsis for your novel. Writing a 500-word synopsis is difficult. No one wants to cut their 80,000 words of lovingly developed prose to a single page, but sometimes it's necessary for publishers or for agents, or, as in this case, because you're planning to enter your manuscript for an award. So, a few pointers. A synopsis is not a pitch, and nor is it a back cover blurb. Your aim is not to sell your idea or your story, but to give a full outline. And that means spoilers. We need you to tell us the ending because we want to know where the story is going. We want to know whether your story has a unique twist or point of view that will make it stand out. We want to know the story makes sense. We want to know there are no gaping plot holes or too convenient fixes. We want to know it's a story that will reward the reader for spending their precious time with your characters and their hard-earned money on your book. Your synopsis needn't be a work of art. We're looking for clarity of expression and ideas, not proof of your ability to turn a phrase. For once, we want you to tell, not show, not the other way round. But that doesn't mean your synopsis can't or shouldn't be engaging. How to be engaging? Write your synopsis in the present tense. Tell us what's at stake for your protagonist, and tell us how that conflict is resolved. You don't need to mention every character. You also don't need to mention every subplot, and you shouldn't include dialogue. And don't include all the backstory. Scratch all of those unless, of course, they're relevant to your core story. No one said it would be easy. Good luck, and we're looking forward to reading your work.
Maya Angelou stated, "The life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away, encourage, enlighten, empower."
Welcome back and welcome to our Ask Devin segment. In this segment, Devin gets to share his professional writing tips with our bookish viewers. Today, we're talking about the next step after completing your final book draft, which is writing a synopsis. Hey, Devin, would you mind sharing your perspective of who needs a synopsis, how to write a synopsis, and what are the common mistakes?
Yeah. I'm going to throw out as much information as possible. And as always, there isn't any, hard and fast rules. Like, in other words, if you're doing something that's completely different, you're entitled to try it out. But remember that you're dealing with a book market and book readers and book publishers who may lean a little bit more traditional. So let's get back to the question. Do you need a book synopsis? I suppose it really depends on whether or not you intend on self-publishing or not, and how you think it may help you down the road. However, my humble opinion is either way, I think it's a good idea to have as much clarity about your story as possible, because not only perhaps will agents and future publishers read it, but it's also going to be part of perhaps your elevator pitch, because there's going to be times where you're going to be in public places and you're going to need to talk about your book. Having a synopsis sort of like already embedded in your head that you can whittle down to like a 30-second or a 15 seconds explanation of your book is a really, really good idea. As we discussed last week, with the 2 weeks that you finished after your first draft, this might be a really good time to write your synopsis. It'll give you a little bit of space. It'll like to kind of reinvest you in your overall story. And I think it's a good place to throw one in. If you're going to do one, start by stating what your genre you're writing in, whether it be romance, science fiction, fantasy, crime, thriller, psychological suspense. And if you are not writing in a clear genre, or you're not sure what your genre is, you can skip this step, but you should return to it. If you're writing for children, you should indicate what group you're writing for. What you definitely need at the top or near the top of the synopsis is a pitch line. This is usually the key question, dilemma, or driving force of the novel. What's at stake? What's the ultimate goal? What's the ultimate thing that we're going to be dealing with? If you know you have a great hook or a high concept, that should be part of your pitch line. Writers understandably get very worked up trying to get their pitch lines right. But remember that you are in any case going on to say more about your story all the way down to the bottom of the page. In the previous segment, we even talked about 500 words. So that's a helpful guideline. It's about 1 page. Some people like to include a quote from the novel. Quotes can offer a glimpse of the tone of your novel, as well as teasing and enticing the reader. It can be a good way to go if you're struggling to come up with a pitch line, but kind of choose one or the other. You don't necessarily need to have both, especially if they're both serving the same purpose.
I tell you, a synopsis is a great way of putting the big picture together to get you to really understand the broad perspective of what you're doing. I think it's such a great insight on writing a synopsis. But what should the synopsis letter cover?
Well, there's some basic things. I mean, just keep thinking in mind of what is your book about? Answer that question. You should probably be home free. But just to give it some detail, the synopsis of your novel should then go on to cover the plot in its broad strokes. Set out your story in the simplest term. Think of economy of words. Don't try to include everything. We don't need all the intricacies, the twists, the turns, subplots, just the major plot points so an agent or any decision maker can see what your novel is and where it's headed. Get your protagonist's name in there early if you only have one clear protagonist, and the main character's motivation. What's the thing that drives them? It's good to show whose storyline this is, but don't put too many characters' names. It's just something that muddles and gets confusing. And remember, you're only dealing with 1 page, so you really have to get concise. You don't need your full cast list. In fact, we don't need many names at all in your package, because I think ultimately it'll clutter things up. This can make your synopsis confusing and difficult to understand if you've just got too many plates spinning, so to speak. Give us the when and the where. We need to know the primary setting for the novel and the time period in which it takes place. It would be very different if you're writing sort of like a Jane Eyre type of novel versus something 500 years in the future. So you need to make sure, because that'll change the dynamic of everything that happens from that point further. Some agents would say they need to see the ending because it's such an important part of the story. And they may be annoyed if it's not there, but others say they don't like any big twist in the tale to be given away because they want to still feel that they're approaching your novel as a reader. You can't rewrite your synopsis for each and every agent. That would be too much. So you'll have to decide on what feels right for you. And really, what I would suggest is, I mean, this is kind of putting this part of the synopsis is really important. But perhaps more important, even before this stage, is to get a handle on who you'd want to send your proposal to, what agents. Read their submission guidelines. This is something you're going to hear me say a lot. You're right. Are you going to want to rewrite this 50 times for 50 agents? No, but you may find that a number of agents have a certain kinds of things they want to see, and I would use that as a guideline wherever possible. So you'll just have to decide what feels right for you and your novel. The best synopsises convey the tone of the novel as well as the plot. If you can find a way to bring the feel, atmosphere, your voice to the novel in the synopsis, it will really bring it to life and give the reader a real strong sense of who you are as a writer on top of it without expressly saying it. It's not essential. So don't worry about it if it's imperfect, if you can't make it absolutely nail it. Just do the absolute best you can and understand that if you can bring this particular element in there, it's going to make it sing, which is a good thing. And by the way, as an overall thing, don't heap praise on yourself throughout your novel or in this synopsis section.
A very, very important part of the process, that's for sure. But what are some common mistakes that should be avoided?
The synopsis is not a place to say you're going to be a huge international bestseller or even comment that the novel is gripping or funny or moving. Leave that for other people's judgments. It's not, talking about the top 10 best-sellingness of the thing or award-winning potential. One page is good, readable, concise length. So get to the point, aim to be succinct, and don't attempt to wedge in more words than really fit onto a page by making your font. By the way, this is kind of a nutty thing. I've seen this done. It's a terrible idea. Don't try to mess with your font size. Most people want to see double spaced 12-point font. So don't mess with font size, spacing. Don't use a ridiculous font don't use some sort of, like something that you'd see out of a comic book strip. Don't use that. I use Arial, something like that. Don't make margins tiny. That just makes the synopsis difficult to read, which is the opposite of what you want to achieve. Don't include chapter breakdowns or mini summaries of the content of individual bits of your book. This isn't your working plan. The agent or publisher doesn't need to know everything. Go for story rather than themes. Tell us what drives your novel, but don't give us a list of themes or imagery with the idea that this will make it seem more deep or meaningful. It's only worth mentioning themes if your book explores big issues that may be topical in society at a particular point in time, or if it's majorly concerned with, for instance, grief as perhaps a driving force of the story. But again, even that, I wouldn't dive into what grief is. if you have or you're working with an unusual narrative structure, it's possible that your novel really is impossible to summarize because it's experimental. Its cast of characters is enormous, and without any sort of centrality, its plot is so unconventional as to barely exist. If your novel is really so extraordinary and unconventional, then you may have to reconsider sort of what a normal synopsis is. But at some point, as a writer, you're going to have to go with the thing that really you are excited by, because hopefully you will take that excitement and give it to the person who's going to be reading it.
In fact, speaking of that, let's look at it from this perspective. If you were an agent, what would you suggest?
Again, the thing that I mentioned earlier is I think it's really important. I would read the submission guidelines. While it would be difficult to write sort of like the one page over and over again, it may not be a terrible idea to kind of tailor make something for every agent possible. And by the way, like if you look at submission guidelines, sometimes they're going to say, send me the first 10 pages of the book. Sometimes they're going to say, send me the last 10 pages. Or, if they don't say first or last, you may just want to send them the 10 best pages. Sometimes it's 25 pages, sometimes it's 5 pages, sometimes it's no writing at all. So keep all those things in mind. The best way to get your answers to a lot of these questions is to make sure that if you're sending something out to a particular agent, that you read their submission guidelines and deliver what it is that they want to see as best to your ability. The other thing is, of course, just to be real specific in general here, is attempt to write a page that gives an idea of what you're trying to do in the novel, and which talks passionately about your novelistic endeavor. Or perhaps try a page from the perspective of a specific character to entice the agent and draw them in, even if it's not actually an overview of the story in the conventional sense. If you're getting the idea, you can play a little bit. I think that's a reasonable thing. Like if you have some really thing like, ooh, this is the thing, then go with that thing. If you read back over it and discover it sounds like it's a little academic, sort of like an exercise, or just very pretentious and unreadable, don't send it out. If you have questions about it, just rewrite it. Rewrite it. That's the joy of writing, is editing. So don't send out your work just because you finished the page. And remember to send your pitch letter and the opening of your novel itself if that's what they want to see. So as always, we encourage our inspiring and aspiring authors to visit e360tv.com and binge watch episodes 1 to 12. By the way, we have a new YouTube channel. We're going to give you details up on that in the coming, probably next week. And when we come back from break, we are going to meet somebody you should all know, Sylvia Worsham, who is an author, speaker, and coach.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Worsham. I'm the recipient today, 10 years ago today, of a second chance at life. So that's who I am. I'm a multilingual and international speaker. I've spoken on virtual stages in Canada, Australia, Mexico, and Europe. I have also become a first-time author of my first book, Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change, where I share real and raw stories of change in my own life and share the blueprints and formulas I used in my own life to uproot those limiting beliefs that stood in my way for so long of fulfillment and joy and absolute confidence in everything that I do. I serve a multitude of communities and people. I'm here to serve humanity. After receiving my second chance at life, I felt indebted to God for helping me survive a 20% chance.
The great Mother Teresa said, If you judge people, you have no time to love them. Encourage, enlighten, empower.
Welcome back and welcome to the Author's Corner. Our mission here at Bookish is to encourage, enlighten, and empower inspiring and aspiring, as Devin said, authors to write and publish their story. So how was your week?
It's been great. It's been really great. I've had a really great weekend. Ran a Spartan marathon this last weekend.
Very cool. You ran a marathon?
A Spartan race, yeah. Feels like a marathon. Sure felt like one.
Anything other than around the block to me would feel like a marathon. So any plans for the upcoming weekend?
Just working out. Just keep working out.
Uh-oh. Somebody's interrupting us. So Martine, if you don't mind, can you read our guest, Sylvia Worsham's bio?
Oh, I'm super excited. I was looking at her website a little while ago, and I saw all this really amazing stuff. On Easter, April 8, 2012, a woman in a Catholic diocese walked into Sylvia Worsham's ICU room, and she looked down at her papers and asked if she could pray with her. The lady and her boyfriend, Donnie, and Sylvia formed a prayer circle and recited the Our Father, when suddenly they felt a love so complete and powerful that enveloped the room. And when the woman left the room, Donnie turned to Sylvia and said, "You felt him too, didn't you?" Surviving a near-death experience changes you forever, that's for sure. And most people have had similar experiences will tell you that there's a period of renewal that occurs after such an event. And as time went on, however, the question of what's my purpose in life and what else is left for me to do, that dominated Sylvia's thoughts and started her on a quest to answer those questions. That turning point had awakened her from a life of survival, which was crucial after her divorce in 2009, to being a top salesperson at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals and earning a six-figure income. This was the dream job. The success and value for her was all about the size of her paycheck. And at the time, the limiting belief of I'm not enough that dictated her actions. And all that was important to her was about getting there, that place. This meant being the number one salesperson in her division, which was achieved in April 2009 by focusing on achieving happiness. She had left her son to cope with the aftermath of the divorce alone, an unwise choice that left her reeling with shame and guilt for many years afterward. That near-death experience was God's way of awakening her to her true purpose in life, to the important people in her life. One morning, in reflection and in conversation with God, Sylvia felt a prompting to follow that dream that she had put on hold, to join John Maxwell's team as a speaker, coach, and trainer. Following her intuition that morning, the certification process began, and in August 2017, that dream became a reality. That's an inspiring story. Welcome, Sylvia, to Bookish Talks. Thank you for visiting us.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this group.
Sylvia, our mission at Bookish is to enlighten, encourage, and empower aspiring authors to write and publish their story by sharing empowering stories. Sylvia, can you share how joining John Maxwell's team encouraged you to become an empowerment coach? And tell us about your purpose in writing your book, Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change.
I love those questions, and thank you so much for asking them. As I went to the live certification event in August of 2017, I heard multiple leaders from the John Maxwell team speak. I realized that's who I wanted to become. I wanted to become someone who could empower and motivate others to step into their own light, emerge into the light that they were created, that person they were created to be, and do it joyfully. Because in life, there's always a balance and there's always joy in the journey. And what inspired me to write the book was a prompting I had felt for many years. But you see, in the space that I operated from a perfectionist and achiever space. And that came from my limiting beliefs of I'm not enough. But when you become and you step into the light, you know that you can do that for others, and you can do that very powerfully. So the purpose of writing the book is to tell all the beautiful souls in the world that they have a light inside of them. They have gifts left untapped. They're genius. Authors need to write their books, need to continue writing the books that are placed in their heart to write. There's always a desire that comes into play. And when they act on those desires, they are in full alignment to their soul. And that to me was the reason why I wrote the book, so that people out there, particularly parents, single parents who find themselves at a crossroads, not feel alone in their journey, but also know that there is light at the end of a very traumatic and dark tunnel.
So, Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change. What specifically inspired that title? Because I will say, as a writer myself, the idea of putting together a title can be really hard. It's easier to write the story than it is to kind of create this title. What was it for you?
For me, I took myself on a journey as I wrote the book. I looked at the different elements that came into play as I navigated change in my life. What brought about that title was there is so much wisdom in change. When you go through change in life, you're not just operating from the mindset piece. So as a coach, as an empowerment coach, you understand the subconscious mind has zero filter. And as you go through change, the subconscious mind is operating from a automatic space that you have programmed it. So if you're operating from a fear-based identity, that's where your mind is operating from. And when you undergo change, you need to understand that. So journey to me was, I took myself on a journey from where I started, where trauma and modeling and childhood experiences formed and shaped me into the woman that I was, until that turning point where I nearly died and it woke me up. And then it started a different shift in my life. And I started to understand what it meant to be in alignment with my mind, with my fear-based ego, and my soul. Because as we navigate change, we have these two identities that kind of battle out in us. We want something more for ourselves. We have these big visions for ourselves and these desires, but yet we're operating from that fear-based space. And that's where I was, that perfectionist achiever in me, the one that did not feel enough, that did not feel worthy of my father's affection. That person was operating from that space until the awakening. And then that shift turns, right? So that's why we say a turning point can be life-changing. And the basis of the book is to say that there's a theme that's the undercurrent of it is turning points are life-changing, and they can shift your life in the direction of what you're truly meant to do in this world.
How did you, I'm shifting gears a little bit, how did you decide to e-publish?
I decided to e-publish because everybody was on the internet. Everybody was reading on their phones. And so I went with the times. And since this book was written during the pandemic in 2020 is when it actually started, I started the process and I got really serious in 2021. I decided, well, everybody's online. So first and foremost, ebook was going to be an offering. Now it's also offered in hardcover and paperback. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, Sylvia, I love everything you said, like the wisdom of change and, and just how you focused on your desires and all that. And I love what you were talking about that shift, how you saw that shift. Could you share a little bit more about how, I would imagine you ran into a wall and then you shifted. How did you break through that wall to get to the shift?
I turned to my intuition, my inner wisdom, because what that turning point showed me that when you face death and you're told by 6 doctors walking into your room, basically saying, you have a 20% chance of surviving. That's a hard thing to face in itself. And I had faced hard things in my life, like divorce, but that alone, that shift was an awakening of sorts, because I had been very stubborn in my ways. I had been operating from that fear-based space. And I thought, well, that, to get there, that magical place that we all think of is going to give us this happiness. And then you get there, right? And I stood on stage in front of 300 of my peers at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and I was on stage as a speaker sharing my story of how I got there. And I remember feeling not happy and not fulfilled. So when you face 6 doctors and you fully surrender to what is going to happen, you don't know what's going to happen in that ICU room. You just know that the medical community is not confident. They're doubtful that you're going to make it. And so you step in there with faith and confidence and belief that you will survive. There's a major shift internally that occurs. And when I surrendered, I started to tune more into my intuitiveness, to my intuitive hits, to my inner wisdom. And the more I turned inward for my answers, the more my path revealed itself. And the same thing happened in the book. I didn't know where I was going to start. Like Devin was talking about earlier, it's like you got to know, you have to have a clear vision of what you are talking about. And at first, as a first-time author, what created that shift was turning inward and staying silent and listening for what was coming next. And sometimes I was sent messengers that shared what I was supposed to be talking about next.
Wow. And is that so are you continuing that source, those messengers to come through you to move you in your journey?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, because I used to be that person that looked outward for my answers, and I didn't feel fulfillment, even though I got there.
I know that we're running out of time, but I know that Tim has a couple questions for you.
Sure.
In fact, Sylvia, one of my favorite sayings is illiteracy in the 21st century won't be someone who can't read or write, but it would be someone who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. So your story of change, thank you very much for sharing that. That's a very important thing for us to be learning. But I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. Why don't you tell us about your mastermind and how it empowers individuals to make the required changes in their life?
Well, the masterminds are now going to be shifted over to the book. And how it does is I'm going to be picking certain chapters depending on the audience that I get and what crossroads they're currently facing, because every chapter talks about different lessons in the book. So if I have, for example, divorced parents, for example, then chapter 5 and 6 will likely be in there. But for sure, chapter 4 is going to be in there. And chapter 4 dives into the blueprint, taking a turning point and talking about the different characteristics that identify that turning point, what your subconscious mind is doing, what your conscious mind is doing, what your environment might, your intuitiveness, all of that is what is discussed in chapter 4. So how it helps people and motivate people is to give them a clearer view to help them create the vision for the life that they want, because you want to create that GPS, that guidance system. Your mind needs guidance, because what it does is it operates from your past programming. So if it's operating from a space of fear, that's what we're going to uncover, like what's holding you back. So for sure, chapter 1, chapter 4, and depending on the theme that I have going on with the audience, we will pick the other chapters as they come about. Because like I said, the chapter 4 has from turning point all the way to your soul identity and everything in between. And there's 5 steps that I share in the book.
Well, speaking on behalf of Bookish Talk, your message is extremely inspiring, and I want to thank you for sharing that with us. What is your vision for 2022, and how can we help you support that vision?
You know, I love that you asked me that question, because I'm constantly creating visions. I love creating vision boards are my thing. And so what I've created is I need to take this global. And I'm a Spanish speaker. That's my first language. So I have already begun the process of translating Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom and Change into Spanish. And so I really need to get on as many podcast interviews and shows, but now shifting gears into the Spanish environment, the Spanish world, speaking world. So if you have any contacts, that would be very helpful for us.
Well, that's what this is about. This is about networking. So again, thank you very much. Bookish Talk is sponsored by Pivot Point School for Entrepreneurs. When you are ready to pivot from employment to entrepreneurship, and man, are we seeing that a lot every day. They will point you in the right direction. Visit thrivingwomennetwork.com to learn more about their 10-week online certification course and scholarship program that starts April 23rd. When we come back from break in the Bookish Club, we will share our book recommendations. This is going to be exciting. Please stay tuned.
Hi everyone, I'm Rincy and I'm one of the contributing editors over at BookRiot, and I have today's reader question. So last week I asked you guys about what big buzzy books you guys were really wanting to read but you hadn't gotten around to yet, and you guys left a whole bunch of books in there, many of which that I had completely forgotten about that I definitely want to read as well. Some of you guys even blamed us at BookRiot for, making the problem worse. So my question this week is a little bit broader version of that same question, and it's what genre of books have you not read yet that you really, really want to? There are a number of reasons why you might not have read this genre yet. You might be afraid of it, you don't know where to start, there are just, again, too many books and too little time. For me, the genre I think that I most want to read that I haven't tried yet is science fiction. I have read some really light science fiction books in the past. I mean, I read like The Martian, and that's technically considered science fiction, and earlier this year I read Sleeping Giants by Sylvia Worsham, I believe is the author's name, and that one's technically considered science fiction as well, but I consider those super light science fiction because it's very, very light on the science side. I would like to do a deeper dive into science fiction one day and read some like sort of harder science fiction stuff to see whether or not I would actually enjoy it, just because I feel like I wouldn't, or at least I'm making the assumption that I wouldn't just based on the fact that I like more character-driven stories rather than plot-driven stories, but again, it's wrong for me to judge an entire genre without giving it a good chance. So yeah, leave a comment down below with what genre you haven't read yet that you want to, and maybe the reason why you haven't yet. And also check out the comments below and see if there are any genres that you really love that you see that other people want to try, and maybe recommend a book or two to them.
Professional boxer Muhammad Ali stated, "Don't count the days, make the days count. Encourage, enlighten, and empower."
And welcome back to Bookish. So this is our segment where we recommend books, stuff that we personally read, stuff that we love. And of course, if I'm honest with you, the goal of this segment is to encourage you to venture outside of your comfort zone and the kinds of books that you read, explore different genres. And so that's what we're going to be doing as we do every week. Let's start off with Tim. Tim, what you got for us?
My book this week is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. If you want to know how important this book is to me, it's the first business book I gave my son to read. In fact, the whole reason for Pivot Point School for Entrepreneurs is because of this book. This is where people are going from being an employee to entrepreneurs. Just a real quick breakdown on the book. So Poor Dad is Robert Kiyosaki's dad. He's a professor at a university. So he's got that typical 9-to-5 job, while Rich Dad is his best friend's father, who becomes the wealthiest guy in Hawaii. And so one quick story, when he and his buddy were young, they were trying to figure out how to make money. So they went to his buddy's dad, Rich Dad, and Rich Dad hired he and his buddy to help in what was like a 7-Eleven. And this is in Hawaii, so it was dusty. So all they did, they were cleaning cans, and they got paid like 10 cents an hour. And he was there for a couple of weeks, and he realized that he was getting ripped off. And he went back to his buddy's dad and goes, "You're taking advantage of your son and me." And his father said, "No, I didn't. You agreed to the price. That's an employee." And this whole mindset of going from employee to entrepreneur. We all used to be entrepreneurs, by the way. We were called farmers. But this whole notion of going from being an employee mindset to an entrepreneur mindset can rest on the shoulders of this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So if you guys want to get into that new mindset of where we're going from a work perspective, please read this book. It's a great book.
And my book for this week is Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. This is sort of just a classic. A lot of people have read this book, particularly if you want to be a writer. Let me just read a little bit, and then I'll tell you kind of more about why you might want to read this. The very first thing I tell my new students on the first day of a workshop is that good writing is about telling the truth. We are a species that needs and wants to understand who we are. Sheep lice do not seem to share this longing, which is one of the reasons why they write so very little. But we do. We have so much we want to say and figure out. Year after year, my students are bursting with stories to tell, and they start writing projects with excitement and maybe even joy. Finally, their voices will be heard. And they are going to get to devote themselves to this one thing that they've longed to do since childhood. But after a few days at the desk, telling the truth in an interesting way turns out to be about as easy and pleasurable as bathing a cat. Some lose faith. Their sense of self and story shatters and crumbles to the ground. Anne Lamott's a brilliant writer, and she's charming and funny, and she's your friend. And she has a very specific style that lends itself to kind of reaching out and connecting to you as an individual. I recommend that you read it, especially if you're going to be writing nonfiction, and especially if you're going to be focusing on that piece of nonfiction that's very personal. I highly, highly recommend it. And I know that Martine has a book for us today.
I do. First off, Devin, I love listening to you talk about books, because whenever you're sharing, your book, I just feel like I should be under a tree, just sitting there reading it. It's just like kind of just going old school, My book this week is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it's just so rich. Everything in this book is so rich. There's a part that talks about being greater than the feelings that you've memorized in your body, and it's just about connecting to your body and separating your body from your mind. And when we can separate our body from our mind, then we're not driven by our emotions as much. We're not driven by those old memories of sadness and despair and hurt and pain and all those things that we have. But we can actually create new thoughts. We can create new memories and create new personalities, and we can move forward. And I just love it. And what I want to share is not only the book, but I want to share how I actually read books, because I think it's an important thing to share. So if you notice my book, I mark my books all up, and maybe that's a terrible thing to do. But what I do is when I read a book, guys, is I will mark and I will write a little synopsis of what I think of, or what I feel is important for me to remember, so that when I go back and look at the book, not only can I read the passages, because I'll highlight them and underline them, but I'll read what note did I write about that, so that I can connect deeper with that book. Because people that write books, you, all of us, and all you out there, you write books because you're sharing your soul, you're sharing your spirit, and I just believe it's important for readers to stay connected to those books that they read.
You are a book nerd after my own heart.
I am.
Thank you, Martine. Bookish Talk is sponsored by Pivot Point School. If you are pivoting from employment to entrepreneurship, they will point you in the right direction. Visit thrivingwomennetwork.com to learn about the 10-week online course and how to begin to write your business plan. Spring semester starts April 28th. We will be right back.
Choice and opportunity, the foundation of the Capital Choice mission. We believe everyone has the choice to take control of their own financial independence, and we want to give more people the opportunity to achieve their goals. At Capital Choice, we help make financial wellness a reality. And you can be a critical part of the charge, a part of something bigger. Our associates are more than just salespeople to us. We're a team, a family that supports each other, and we have fun doing it. We want you to succeed. So we offer mentorship and training to help you get comfortable with the industry and serving clients. Our goal is to get you to a place of independence, to be in business for yourself. You choose how to grow, and we'll never take that away from you. Your business focus, how you build your team, how you serve clients, how high you climb, full-time versus part-time. The sky's the limit, and we'll be there for help and support along the way. At Capital Choice, we are passionate, empathetic, real. We give everyone equal opportunity, but you have the control and make the decisions. Want to see what you can achieve with more choice and opportunity? Join our team and find freedom with Capital Choice. Your business, your choice.
Brian Tracy once said that optimism is the one quality most associated with success and happiness more than any other. Courage, enlightenment, and power.
Welcome back. We encourage our viewers not to limit yourself to one category of book or literature because you don't know what you don't know. It's the whole notion of keeping an open mind. I love that topic. You may have a passion to read, but if you only had limited exposure to literature, you may end up writing in a genre that doesn't suit your skills. Reading from various library categories allows you to be inspired by new voices and new ideas. Watch recent episodes on e360tv.com.
As always, thank you for joining us on Bookish Talk. We sincerely hope that we said something that encouraged, enlightened, or empowered you to begin your journey to write your legacy book. Be sure to join the Bookish Club and begin your journey to journal. I love alliteration. Tune in next week and we will share some tips more about writing and how to do it better and how to do it more and get your writing done. Visit us at our website, www.thrivingwomen.com, thrivingwomennetwork.com, and subscribe and leave a question or comment in our live chat. Thanks for being here with us.